Today, I'm delighted to have the wonderful Patrick Grant as my guest. A champion of sustainable fashion, Patrick speaks fearlessly about considering how we value our clothes, how much we buy, what they're made from, and most importantly, who made them and where. His revolutionary clothing brand, Community Clothing, pledges to do good for the UK manufacturers, their local communities, and the planet as a whole. Patrick is an outspoken advocate for radical change in the fashion industry. He's a regular on our TVs, best known, of course, for the hit BBC series, The Great British Sewing Bee. Patrick, here we are in lovely North Yorkshire, and we're in Patrick's rather beautiful kitchen. 3 aspects, windows, kitchen.
Good, isn't it?
It's really beautiful. In a lovely, this is one of our yellows, yes? This is
Duster, yeah.
Which is the first time I've actually seen it painted, and it's really beautiful. It's a nice muddiness to it, isn't it?
It is. It's a very natural, it feels like it sits within this landscape in a really nice, easy way.
It's a good yellow.
It's
I'm kind of thinking
yellow.
I might want to use it.
There's a lovely view out the back as well of the completely derelict still cottage and barns.
But it's kind of lovely. It's still rather lovely there in a weird way.
There's a sort of national trustiness about it.
Yeah.
I think I probably just need to tidy it up and put a sign on. Oh look, you can see now the fog has lifted.
Oh my God, we have a view. That's exciting.
Yeah, we've even got some sheep showing their slightly muddy, I'm going to say muddy,
okay, dirty
bums over the ha-ha.
It's really glorious, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you've got that lovely rhythm of the dry stone walling going off into the horizon.
I made, for my girlfriend's Christmas, I made a picture of it on a tile with Craven Dunhill Jackfield. I did the sort of slip drawing.
That view?
Yeah, I've got it upstairs. I'll show it to you.
Fantastic.
I've got it upstairs.
Did she love it?
Yeah, she actually wept.
Did she?
Yeah. Any sort of making stuff. This is another thing.
Yes, what are you doing here?
Well, this is my
spice jars.
This is my dad's old spice rack.
Did he make it?
He built it, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
And the jars are pretty much all the jars that he had. They're glass jars with a plassy lid, which I don't love, but I like to relabel them. I sort of decided to paint little labels. So this is a job that I started doing about 4 days ago, and that's why it's still on the table to be done. Okay. I painted those ones, but I'm just going to use coloured pencils, crayon pencils to do them because it's a little easier. But yeah, little making jobs.
Okay, it makes you happy.
Make me very happy.
Okay.
I'll probably sit and do that for about 2 or 3 hours, and at the end of it, feel much better.
One of the reasons we're here, my good man, is we've come to talk about colours.
Great.
So where we start off is the colour of your childhood.
I have chosen broccoli brown, which I've actually painted my dining room next door.
Oh, which we saw earlier.
We saw earlier.
Yeah.
So through the pantry into the dining room. And I've chosen it because it was the sort of nearest colour to the colour of the mud, which was the defining feature of most of my childhood and quite a lot of my early adulthood. I grew up mostly in the garden and in a big wooded valley called the Hermitage of Braid, which is now a local nature reserve in Edinburgh. So, when we were really young, we would make mud pies in the garden. We had some old pans and we would make mud pies and occasionally eat bits of mud pies.
Can I ask why you make mud pies?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I think we were just cooking and mud was the most abundant ingredient that was available to us in the garden.
Okay.
So we made mud pies and then we graduated onto basically spending our life in the Hermitage, and so, would be muddy. We were just muddy. This is Scotland. Mud was a very, very defining feature of all of the time we spent in the Hermitage. And the Hermitage is an amazing place. It's great, big, steep-sided wooded valley, quite different at the one end to the other. Lots of beautiful, mature beech trees up at the farther end. There's a river that runs through the bottom of it. We built gang huts. We built a thing that we called the Snogarium, which I'm not going to go into.
Okay.
But we sort of lived there. We'd get kicked out the house at 8 o'clock in the morning and we'd come back at 6 o'clock at night, filthy, but, having spent the whole day I don't know what we did.
Is
but
this
we occupied our time. Morningside, Edinburgh,
okay.
yeah. So just, I grew up on the street.
You don't
called
have a
Hermitage
Morningside accent?
Morningside? No, I don't. But I did have, but I went to school not far from here, up in County Durham. So there was that bit of mud. But there was also, I was a pretty good rugby player. I'm being modest. I was a good rugby player. I played international rugby as a junior. And when we were young, and we played on the back pitches at Murrayfield. I played for a club called Edinburgh Wanderers that played in this really lovely black and red sort of. I've still got a fade. It's almost sort of the red of the stripe on that kilim on that sofa there. In fact, that black and red is Edinburgh Wanderers colour combo. But we played on the back pitches at Murrayfield. There was mud everywhere there. But I was thinking about this, and at the end of training, especially when we were doing sort of international stuff, we got to bath in the baths inside Murrayfield Stadium. Murrayfield Stadium at the time, we're talking about the early 80s. They had giant tiled baths that would fit 15 men. Massive.
In those days, men drank quite a lot. The forwards.
Well, I think generally we were a little smaller than the players are now, because they're about 30%
you have
heavier. More beer bellies and fewer massive necks. Yeah, we would get in to these gigantic baths, and it was basically like this sort of mud soup. It reminds me of the pig's watering trough.
Right, okay.
Because they get their feet in and their snouts in, and they kind of, so if you wash it out, it's brown within seconds. But the brown, hot, soupy brown mud that we bathed in at the end of a rugby match is quite a vivid memory of my childhood. And I've just always been a lover of brown.
Okay. I've been banging on for years about how we should decorate with brown, because I think it's the chicest colour.
Yeah.
And you will know this with your fashion background. Wearing brown is often quite flattering to the skin tone.
It's very flattering and very easy because it goes with everything.
It goes with everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got quite a bit of brown in the house.
Right, okay.
And I've got quite a bit of brown, although I'm dressed head to toe in navy blue.
Yeah, you're a utilitarian, Cliff. This is really interesting.
Well, this is me most of the time. But I wear a lot of brown. I've got a lot of brown tailoring. I very rarely wear a white shirt. I normally wear a very pale brown shirt.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm down with brown. What's the story of broccoli brown? Why broccoli brown?
Well, we did a collection called The Colours of Nature from a beautiful book called Werner's Nomenclature of Colour.
Okay.
So, which again is possibly 18th century, possibly 19th, on the cusp of late 18th, early 19th. And it's a reference point to objects in nature with a particular colour point. Okay. So actually, when we produced the colour card, it's rather lovely. So I think we did 16 colours from Werner's Nomenclature, and broccoli was one of them. Because broccoli brown sounds really unappetizing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So,
well, it sort of conjures like that.
Overboiled.
Or when it rots, it goes a browny colour.
And then it stinks. So, But actually, there's a lovely kind of quote from mineral, animal, and all these different reference points to nature. So we had other things like lake red, which is almost a bit, actually not like your faded red of your kilim again.
Yeah.
So sap green, which is another colour. It's just really beautiful. So, but there's lovely storytelling and narrative with the broccoli brown.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So we're moving on to the colour of your youth.
Well, I've chosen print room yellow because it's the nicest yellow that's closest to the yellow of the smiley acid house face.
Okay. Okay. So, I love the fact that that's kind of an 18th century colour reference to acid house.
To a late 80s subculture.
Okay.
Yeah, we started to go to raves in the late 80s. 1988, I remember going to the first one. I remember my friend Jinky and I had gone to try and gate crash a ball in Edinburgh at the Assembly Rooms, and we'd got all our kit on, so we were kilted, black tie, we had our Prince Charlie jackets on. We'd gone to get in this thing and had failed spectacularly badly to get in. So we were sort of at a loose end, so we wandered off. We thought we'd go to Victoria Street and see what was happening, and we ended up in a club called the Kangaroo Club, which was sort of 7 floors down on Victoria Street in one of those amazing Edinburgh buildings, that sort of mad, sort of medieval bit of Edinburgh. And there was this acid house night going on, and we just rocked in our kilts. And at one point, the DJ shouted something like, "Big up to the acid kilts!" And it was me and Jinky were just going mad, like, to this music that we'd never heard before, which was all
the very
bleeps
start
and
of it,
squelches, and it was awful. And if you listen back to it now, It's unlistenable pretty much. It's terrible. But it was the start of this whole wave of, house music that came in from the States. And so, going out, I went to boarding school in Barnard Castle. And the nearest place, we would go out in Newcastle on the weekends, like half terms and exeats and things. We'd go up there. And we'd always go out. One of my best friends, Alex Paul, her brother was a DJ and very, very cool guy. He was like the coolest guy I knew. He was one of those people. He was like the first person ever in the UK to have Air Jordans or something like that. Like, he was the sort of person. He was a seer. He saw the future of fashion, and he was just cool and a real sort of style icon of mine, Chris. And we used to go out a lot and really loved it. And we, when we went, I had a gap year. I spent a gap year in Hartlepool working for a brewery, and then I went to Leeds University. And we went the first year in Leeds. There was a club called Back to Basics, which opened in Leeds, which was sort of transformative for Leeds.
So this is just at the end of the 80s. So.
This is early 90s.
Early
now.
90s.
Early
okay.
90s. Back to Basics opened, and then there was a club called Vague. And Vague was this extraordinary club, the first big queer club in the north. It was the most amazing community of people who travelled from all over the north. And we loved it, and we loved the music and the dressing up and the fun and the attitude, and everything about it was so joyous. So I've chosen. I also have print room yellow in one of my bathrooms.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
Okay.
The little bathroom upstairs is print room yellow. But yeah, that smiley face. And actually, last week, the guy called Chris, who does the graphic design for Community Clothing, we do a newsletter, a monthly newsletter, a bi-monthly newsletter, and I sort of rough it all together. I write it and pull all the bits in really badly on PowerPoint and just sort of cut and paste things. And he sort of understands my freehand now, and he translates it into the whole thing is sort of hand collaged. We actually cut things out and he glues them in.
Which has kind of got that sort of graphics of that period.
Yeah. And it's based on old fanzine. And he did a thing that was, making good things happen. And he did this acid house smiley face with goggly eyes, which is in the newsletter that's, January, February newsletter. But every time I see it, it just makes me feel good.
It's really funny you talk about that, and it's made me feel very nostalgic. I used to read The Face and ID a lot, and I used to cut out with a scalpel knife the really cool bits and then collage them into a book I had. And I thought I was the coolest kid in the world. And it's like, what I'm doing is cutting bits out of a magazine and creating my own magazine.
My school diaries, we had to have these we had these weekly diaries that school would give you, and you'd put in all your lesson stuff and rugby matches, and it had the calendar of when the carol concerts were and all this stuff. And I would do the same. I would cut out and very, very, very carefully cut out and collage all of the covers of all of those. I've still got quite a few of them. And, I would take a lot of time to collage these things.
Yes, so coming back to the colour, like I said earlier, I love the juxtaposition of acid house and this 18th century. So
18th century what? 18th century what? Why
so the print
room?
room. So quite often you would have these lovely interiors, these sort of mid to late 18th century. And you would have these black and white sort of prints. Almost, you have map rooms.
Oh, I see. So not a
grand
room where
talk.
printing is done, a room where prints are displayed.
It's decoupage. It's very smart decoupage. So now we are moving on with that lovely clear landscape ahead of us to your defining decade.
My defining decade, yes. I've gone with Stooky Blue.
Yeah.
Partly because I spend my life in blue, and I actually have avoided blue in any of the rooms in this house.
Why have you done that?
Well, because I can't see any... I mean, occasionally the sun does shine, but I wanted the colours in the house to feel like they were connected into the landscape in the same way that I'm designing the garden and I'm busy doing the roses. All of the rose colours are colours that appear naturally either in the verges or in the hedgerows around. I'm very, very careful when I'm putting colours together. I mean, again, when I designed clothing collections, I was always fastidious that we used quite a small palette, and every colour would work with every other colour, and I wanted the same here. So all of the colours that I see here on the inside, the furniture, the paint, work with what I see out the window. But I lived, I spent 20 years running Norton & Sons, so which is 2 decades, but we can randomly choose a decade in the middle of those 2 decades.
For people that may not have heard of Norton & Sons, can you just...
So I ran Norton & Sons, which is a bespoke tailors on Savile Row. But I spent 20 years making mostly suits for men who used them to go to work. And 50% of them were navy blue and 50% of them were grey.
Okay.
And I didn't want to choose grey, so I chose Stooky Blue. And I wear a lot of navy blue. I mean, most of the clothes I own and wear are navy blue. It is my sort of basic everyday. It is my basic everyday go-to. I don't know. I once counted how many navy crew necks I had.
Sorry, I'm just squeezing Patrick's jumper.
Yeah.
Okay, it's really thick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And also, it's pretty bomb-proof. I mean, I must have worn it, I don't know, 300 times now, probably. It's going well.
Let's go back to Savile Row and or tailoring.
Yeah.
What took you there?
I'm just distracted by that sheep waggling its tail out the window. It was very, very perky. I was doing a postgrad and I'd gone to meet a friend for lunch and he'd messaged me to say he couldn't make it. So I sat in the dining hall of my college on a table much like this, but in better nick, probably a similar age, although my college dates back to, I think, 1350. It was called New College, which was quite ironic. Okay. I think it's like 30, it is around then. Anyway, it's sort of 700 years old and it's called New College. But the only paper that was left, interestingly, was an FT. And I didn't read the FT every day, but it was the only paper that, hadn't been pinched. And so I sat there because it was late. Everyone else had left the dining hall. And so I had lunch and read the paper. And in the back of the paper on that day there was a section called Businesses for Sale.
Okay.
And on that one day, the owner of Norton & Sons had posted a little advert, said, "For sale, tailor to kings, emperors and presidents. Write to Mr. Granger at 16 Savile Row." And I thought, oh my God, somebody's selling a Savile Row tailor in the back of the paper. And so I couldn't quite believe it. And I wrote to him. I wrote him a letter and he wrote back. And I went to see him and I'm like, this is an actual Savile Row tailor's. It was in voluntary arrangement with the receivers. It was not doing well. And I sold my house, sold my car.
Oh, did you throw everything at it?
Threw everything at it. But, borrowed some money from friends, and my granny, and went all in on this little tailor's that had been there since 1821 and had never really done anything except sort of tootle along, and I loved it. And I'd always loved clothes.
Oh, had you? So
I'd been a clothes.
It
was a huge clothes nut all the way through. I remember probably the age of 12 telling my parents that was it. They weren't to buy me any more clothes. I was sorting all my own clothes out from then on. And I would save up for 6 months to buy one really nice, Vivian Westwood trouser, or there were that was it. Annoyingly, I don't have. They were the high-waisted stripy pirate trousers. I mean, I'm probably saved up. I bought them from a shop called Corniche in Edinburgh, which is still there. Anyway, so that was what I was a nut for clothes. I loved handmade stuff. Most of the things in this house are things that I've had for a very long time.
Okay.
I would always save up and buy a good thing.
Yeah.
Quality was absolutely integral to everything that I liked in life. And so, while my friends were running out buying a whole bunch of stuff, I would buy one thing and look after it and buy it with real care. I mean, I was buying the first bed I bought at Phillips auction room in Edinburgh.
Did you?
It was a enamelled cast iron bed. And I had to get a blacksmith to extend the things because it was too short for me. But so quality was super important. Handmade, beautifully crafted things. So Venn diagram of the things I liked. Clothes, handmade things, and then storied brands. As a kid growing up in Edinburgh, like the casuals were, wearing Leyland Scott deerstalkers and, they were, all these old brands, Aquascutum and Pringle and all these things that no longer exist or don't exist in their proper form. I was, really into the stories of these old brands. So there you had, if you drew a Venn diagram of the stuff I liked, old storied brands, craftsmanship, and clothes. Right in the middle of that, Savile Row. And I thought, gosh. And then I bought this business, and then all my friends were like, yeah, well, of course you're going to end up running a Savile Row Tailors. But, it was hard. The first few years, it was really, really difficult. But it got better quite quickly. And we got a bit of good luck. We got 2 bits of really good luck. Designer called Kim Jones, who's now the Dior and Fendi. Yeah. Kim was not long out of St. Martin's and was doing his own brand. And he came to Savile Row and looked around and was like, oh, this is amazing. And then 6 months later, I got a message from him saying, we've got some stuff we need to make for our collection. We don't know how to make it. We don't even know how to cut the patterns. Can you help? And I was sort of, let me just check the workroom, Kim. Tumbleweed blowing through. And we can just about squeeze you in. Anyway, so we worked with Kim for 3 seasons, and that led to, Kim introduced us to Alexander McQueen, who became a great customer. Okay. And through that, we met, all sorts of other designers in London who ended up becoming customers at Norton's. And, and that we went from being a brand that didn't really stand for very much at that point to being the brand that the London designers went to. And then the other slice of great luck was that the BBC decided to make a documentary series about Savile Row.
Oh, okay.
And they started filming it about 6 months after we'd got there. And we got so much more coverage than we should have done given our relative size. But the first episode, about half of it was me and Norton's. And it absolutely just transformed our business. And, we went from really struggling, I think we multiplied our turnover by about 2.5 in 3 years. Wow. And then we were fine. And we made a profit sort of ever since until COVID. So yeah, and it set us on a path of working on lots and lots of really super fascinating projects. I was doing a talk at school yesterday, just not far from here, at school assembly. I went and saw the textiles students after assembly, and one of them said, "Oh, how would you do a suit that you can dance in?" And I said, "Well, have you ever heard of Tom York?" And they went, "Yes." We did the costume for a Tom York Atoms for Peace video, and it's Tom and a dancer called Fakiko doing this amazing dance, and they both sort of dressed in identical 3-piece tweed suits doing this amazing dance, and the film cuts between the two, so you don't know whether it's Tom or Fakiko, except you do, because
avidly go to the phone trying to find video.
Anyway, but we got to do project. I did so many beautiful, fascinating projects.
Can you cut? Can you physically cut?
I can't cut patterns, but I used to cut out the clothes. So John Kent was our first head cutter, but John would draft the patterns and then lob it over to me, and I would cut it out. Okay. And I learned how to make. I made a jacket, and I learned enough that I could run the business, and I learned how to measure and fit. But I didn't. It's a 5-year apprenticeship to be a cutter, and it's a 4-year apprenticeship to be a coat maker. Wow. I mean, enormous respect for those guys. But I loved it, and then I moved along.
So finally, Patrick, we're moving on to the colour of you now. So what's your colour for the colour of now?
My colour of now is Eddie, which is interesting because it was the name of a fanzine that we created for eTorts. We did a sort of seasonal magazine that went with our collections that was called Eddie, which I've just remembered. I hadn't thought of that until literally this minute. But I sold up in London and moved up here we're sitting in North Yorkshire, but those hills over there with the dusting of snow still on the top, those are the Bowland Fells, so that's Lancashire. So we're very, very close to the border between the two. And I work in Blackburn, and I travel every day through this beautiful, very knocked back, pale green right now landscape. It gets much more green in the summer, but right now it is almost the colour, that sort of dewy, dusty green is the colour of Eddie. Very sort of ancient feeling green.
It's a slightly milky green, isn't it? It's a very gentle milky green.
It's the most relaxing colour. Yeah. And I've got a painting of Blackburn that a very good friend of mine found in an antique shop. And it is the view of Blackburn from the hills above. And the colours of it are mostly sort of very soft browns and greens. And one of the colours that is in this painting is pretty much the colour of Eddie. And So the bedroom that I've slept in most, which is actually the second biggest bedroom, I have painted Eddie, and and that painting is now in that room.
Do you decorate your bedrooms to match your art?
Well, I think I might. I certainly have in this instance.
We'll have a chat later.
Yeah. But I am surrounded by this colour, and I am surrounded by nature. And nature, I started life obsessed with nature. I started life, as I said,
back to your mud.
In the Hermitage, in the mud. But I was a member at Edinburgh Zoo of a thing called the Gannet Club, which was a kids' club at Edinburgh Zoo. So I would go to the zoo a lot. I was really, really into wildlife. I wanted to be a wildlife cameraman when I was younger. I wanted to be a vet at one stage, but my mum pointed out quite rightly that I was too soft and I'd have to put animals down and I'd spend my life in tears. But cycling and hill walking is the thing that I always return to throughout my adult life as a way to sort of restore balance.
So you go out on the bike?
Yeah, I go out on the bike up in the mountains. I love, hill walking and mountaineering. And
you're dripping in national parks around here.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at we're just on the edge of the Forest of Bowland National Landscape here, but that is the Yorkshire Dales National Park out the window.
Okay.
So we're right on the edge of the boundary between the two. But it's always brought me great joy, particularly now. I find being engaged with nature is a thing that gives me enormous, enormous happiness. And so the sort of Eddie is a representation of my love of greenery and nature. This morning, I was looking out the window from my bedroom that looks that way.
So above where we are.
Above where we are now. And I was watching the barn owl hunting along the stone walls here. But I get thousands of birds. If you sit in the birds take their little nibbles from there, and then they fly and they sit in the fuchsia, which is just in front of the dining room window. So I put a bench in the dining room window, and we'll sit
and twitch.
And have coffee. And they are right there outside the window. It's absolutely just gorgeous. So this is what makes me happy now, this connection with nature, and Eddie is that.
Okay. What a lovely story. So, Mr. Grant, this is where we give you a colour, and it's based on one of our colours, but I kind of rename it with a reference to you. Okay. But actually, this is a weird one, because obviously I really know you from TV and kind of your writing and TED Talks and stuff. So this is a colour called Dibber, but because it's you, even though you're in kind of dressed down Tuesday, I'm calling it Dapper. But the reason I quite like Dibber, because it kind of seems relevant for your stories. And Dibber is obviously one of those sort of wooden kind of tools that you sort of for seeding.
I've got a beautiful oak dibber.
Have you? So it's a really slightly mossy green, isn't it? It's a really lovely green, kind of lichen on walls. And you're homesteading a bit.
Yeah.
You've got pigs. You've got all these amazing plants for your garden. So this is Dapper. For Mr. Elegant, Patrick Grant.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll incorporate it into a painting of the landscape.
Yes, there you go. You use it in your art class.
I will change the labels for my spices, and I will do dapper borders on my spice colours on the new labels. There we are, dapper.
Dapper. Perfect. Well, there you go. Happy marriage.
Thank you. I am honoured.
Well, Patrick, I'm honoured. Meeting namesake. And thank you very much for agreeing to see us.
Thank you.
Thank you.